Shabbat Shalom to everyone.
Shabbat Shalom.
We're in the second parasha of the book of Shemot, of the book of Exodus, making our way towards freedom. And this is the parasha where the plagues begin. And it's also the parasha that includes the famous 4 words of redemption, V'hotzeti, V'hitzalti, V'ga'alti, V'lakachti, and some say V'heveti too. That God will bring us out from the land of Mitzrayim, that God will save us, that God will redeem us, and God will take us and then bring us to the promised land. And in the course of the first verb, V'hotzeti, the pasuk is, Lachen omer livnei Yisrael ani Adonai v'hotzeti etchem mitachat sivlot Mitzrayim. I will remove you from under the burdens of Egypt, that I will take you out from under the burdens of Egypt. And there's a disciple of Rav Kook who lived in Israel and Yerushalayim, Rabbi Yaakov Moshe Harlap, who focuses on this pasuk and teaches the following commentary. He says the Jewish people have the most remarkable ability to tolerate their exile. But when the time of redemption comes, there will be a reawakening that will make it impossible to suffer exile any while longer. And that will be one of the signs of redemption. So there's something I think very powerful about the notion of our ability to tolerate our pain. You know, that I don't know that that's specific to the Jewish people, but certainly the Jewish people have endured an incredible amount of pain over the course of our history. And in some way that has built a certain resilience, that there's a certain story, that we tell our story from that place of pain in towards the power of redemption. And that experience, in fact, of knowing that we've been there, gives us a certain amount of strength to tolerate it moving forward. But then he says there is a point no more, where that we reach some apex where it's not any more tolerable, which itself is a sign that it's time to come out. And I think it's a very, it relates also to the fact that they cry out in last week's parasha, and it says again in this week's parasha that God hears their cry, which many attribute that crying out to be one of the signs that redemption is to come, because they finally are crying out. Like they finally have decided no longer in some way can they tolerate the pain, and it in and of itself is to say, enough, this isn't the state of what life should be, is the first sign that redemption is to come. What do you make of that?
I think that there's a living in peace with your suffering. You know that to the point that you don't realize there's something else, that there's a possibility. And I think the commentators say the moment they cry out in last week's parasha, that's when God hears them.
Yes.
And responds, hears their cry and responds, and now is the moment to take them out. First had to come their cry, and then God acts.
Yeah.
And the cry is the first sign of their discomfort, of their awareness,
yeah,
of their condition, and that this condition is now intolerable, that there is another possibility, that there's something else. And I think we often, as individuals, and I think as peoples, we settle for the suffering and for the pain, and it becomes part of us, without the realization that there is something else, that we can actually fight, struggle to get out of this pain, do whatever it takes to get to another place. And I think it's true in the story of slavery in this country too.
Yeah.
You know that there was a moment,
yes,
there was an awareness, and then it's the struggle that carried then forward by Dr. King, that it can't be. But you have to come to the place of the realization that this condition in which you are can no longer be tolerated or acceptable.
Which in many ways, of course, the Hasidic commentaries, the Nitzivot Shalom, amongst many, speak that the stages of redemption, the first is that sense of awareness, that you actually realize that this isn't normal, that kind of pain, that kind of, they talk about being in the womb of Mitzrayim, that the people of Israel just didn't know anything different. I mean, after 400 years, why would you know anything different? We become accustomed to our own.
In the story of Yaakov and Yosef and their brothers, when they are in Mitzrayim and the whole family comes there, at some point the commentator says that their eyes and their hearts close. Right. They basically are no longer aware of what's going on, and they become enslaved.
Yes.
And then the first one who opens their eyes in the commentary and the heart is Moshe. Yeah. He goes out and he sees the suffering of his siblings, of his brothers and sisters, brethren.
Yeah.
And he's the one who opens his eyes and his heart.
Right.
And then God opens God's eyes and heart later on when God hears the cries. So it's all about this opening and closing and opening.
Which is what Mitzrayim means, the narrow place, that you're not open to, you don't have a sense of expansiveness. And so I think this is, it's not only true, of course, for our own suffering, but it's true also to see other people's suffering too, that we're complacent and this is the way it should be, or this is the way it is. There's nothing to do about the state of the world. We kind of become accustomed to just what it means to have poverty, or what it means to have marginalization in so many different ways. And we kind of say, the status quo is good enough, it will eventually find its way. Yeah. And there has to be that kind of awakening for that shift, the catalyzation of something towards change. And I think there's something else which I think is often our suffering, we suffer internally. We suffer without speaking our suffering. Part of, I think, why we do the Haggadah the way we do is to actually speak it out, to tell the story. And sometimes we suffer in silence. And something I think also powerful about the cry is it actually allows us to liberate from the isolation of suffering. And we're in such hard times that I think the crying out is in so many different ways. We're living with so much suffering in the world. And part of, I think, what we need to awaken is to be able to both awaken our own suffering and release it, and be together in our suffering as community, as a people, and also bear the burden of other people's stories of suffering. That we have to awaken ourselves to some expansiveness, that we don't only have to speak our own suffering, but that we can actually tolerate other people giving voice to the suffering, because then we might actually be able to listen and catalyze some form, that is the awakening towards redemption. No one's suffering is exclusive. And I think why, in many ways, this story of Yetziat Mitzrayim, of the Exodus from Egypt, is told over and over again, and it's told by, it's the driver of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s whole orientation towards the redemption of the enslaved people in our own country, that it is that sense that we have to wake up and want something else, and to demand something else, not only of ourselves, but where we live. And so on the Shabbat of Parashat Va'era, on the Shabbat of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. weekend, I think Shabbat is also a time to release ourselves from that isolation, to open ourselves up to what we might feel, and in some way liberate ourselves from the closeness that we might experience through the week, to open ourselves to what might be possible. Sometimes that comes with tears, sometimes it comes with cries, but certainly the possibility of being together in community and holding ourselves to something else, to be able to say there must be something else out there, which is a vision that is very dim in this world right now, but we have to continue to assert. And if any story is telling us that that's true, it's this one, and the story of Dr. Martin Luther King.